And then we reverberate. We keep ruminating about it after the email.
I know, that was 4 weeks ago, and I was thinking about it at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, so how does it work in the brain?
Yeah, how does it work? Can you show us?
Sure. So if we draw a little diagram of the brain with, this is the front of the brain, and this is the back of the brain, there is a big chunk of real estate right up front here that we call the prefrontal cortex.
That's right behind the forehead, right?
Right behind the forehead. And one of the amazing things about the prefrontal cortex is that if you look over the course of evolution, this area of the brain grows more prominently in humans than in any other species. So this is a really important chunk of real estate, and it probably has a lot to do with things that are characteristically human.
In fact, it's called the brain's executive center. It's like the CEO of the brain.
So this area of the brain has important connections to the emotional areas of the brain. We were talking about the source of distraction being emotion in many, many cases, and buried in the middle of the brain, sort of right around here, is a structure that we call the amygdala.
Oh yeah, the amygdala is the brain's trigger point. It's like the radar for threat, the fight or flight or freeze response, which are very primitive, but it happens in today's offices all the time.
And so there is a direct connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, and it is a structure that we call the uncinate fasciculus.
You remember the uncinate fasciculus? I don't think anybody heard of it, but
So this is the connection, and it doesn't matter what it's called, but what we find in the scientific evidence is that when we practice mindfulness for some period of time, it doesn't happen instantaneously, this connection is strengthened. And this allows the prefrontal cortex to modulate the impulses from the amygdala and to recover more quickly.
Modulate means the amygdala says, this guy's ticking me off, I'd like to slug him, and the prefrontal cortex says, just say no. It's inhibitory, right?
Inhibitory.
Turns it off.
Yeah.
Tones it down.
Tones it down. And
So this is another important consequence, is that emotionally, first you don't react as much, and then you recover more quickly, isn't that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the recovery more quickly is really an important attribute of what we think of as resilience. Resilience is in many ways the ability to recover more quickly from adversity. So instead of ruminating about the email that ticked you off for several weeks after the email, you can come back down and recover.
That's
quickly.
great news.
It is great
Yes.
news. And we don't need anything other than our minds and training our minds to do this.
So are there other important findings for folks in the business world from mindfulness? Any other benefit?
There are a whole slew of other findings that we think are beneficial, and some of them relate to this. The ability to focus attention and to selectively focus on what we choose to focus on. We are in environments that have all kinds of competing information, and we work often in workplaces that are filled with all kinds of information overload, and the ability to selectively focus on certain things and ignore other things is part of our capacity as humans. The prefrontal cortex has a lot to do with that.
So basically, mindfulness works in a couple of ways. It makes less mind wandering. It strengthens the prefrontal ability to say no to those, like, I gotta do it, emotional impulse. And it also helps us keep our attention on that one thing that's so important. So in other words, there are a lot of benefits.